Hello and Happy New Year! Welcome to my 10th video. I should really stop counting these now. But anyway, in this video, I'll show you how to sketch in any object you can think of, including the ones that you can see on the screen right now. Without further ado, let's start the tutorial. Also have a new TikTok account you can follow anytime. So the first thing to ask yourself is, what shape is my object? And this is probably one of the most important questions to ask yourself. Is it curvy, or does it have many sides? These are referred to as rectilinear and curvilinear objects. This is really important to know because each type of object will require a different sketching process. It will require a different approach to shading. And what do I mean by this exactly? Well, let's jump straight into the rectilinear method of shading, shall we? Let's start off with the cube. Now, if you want to see the complex shape rather than the cube or the sphere, you can always skip to the following timestamps, or you can also check the description as well. But just start off by drawing a cube, which you can either follow the dimensions that I'm showing on the screen now, or by just drawing a simple square and attaching rods like I'm showing on the screen now. After you've done your cube, or if you've already got a cube, it's time to shade in. Now, in my cube, I'm going to have the lighting from this angle. This means that this face will need to be sort of moderate brightness because it's somewhat turned away from the light, but it isn't too far away from the light. On the contrary, the top of the cube will be the lightest because it's the closest and the most turned towards the light. And you want to make every single side very smooth, which you can do by just going over it numerous times. There's some other methods you can use as well, which I'll talk to you about later. And finally, on this side of the cube, this will be the darkest side. And this is because it's the furthest away from the light. The light isn't really touching it. But at the same time, don't draw it completely black either, because then that will just have too much contrast. So you want to sort of make it the darkest, but don't make it too dark. We don't want too much contrast. And once you've done that, you can blend via using a blending stump, or you can just use your finger. It's up to you, really. But you want to make every single side very smooth. And as you can see, I'm rubbing it out myself because I made it a bit too dark. But yeah, you just need a blending stump. And also, I recommend using the style of your pencil as well. That'll make the smoothest shade. That'll make everything the smoothest. Keep on rectifying this, and once you're happy, we can move on to our complex shape. And finally, if you so choose, you can add a shadow underneath the object as well. Just make it a bit more 3D. I don't quite have a tutorial, and I don't think I've quite mastered shadows yet, but I can always do a tutorial in the future if you like, if you want to see how to do shadows. But that's not the main point. This is just a shading of the actual object itself. But anyway, let's move on to the next bit. That's out of the way. How do you shade things in that are not just simple cubes? Well, again, you just got to think about lighting. For example, I've drawn this paper crane, just the outline. I do want to reiterate, though, that this is not a story about how to draw the paper crane. Rather, it's just a tutorial on how to show you how to draw and shade in any objects of your choice. And you just got to think about where the light is. So, for example, the light source is here, sort of like in front, but mostly on top of the object. And as you can see, the ones that I've already drawn are sort of slightly darker than, say, ones that would point upwards, because it's slightly away from the light. This one that I've drawn here is a lot darker than everything else because it's more inside, so therefore the light is not getting to it. This part that I'm shading in here is very light indeed because it's directly pointing towards the light source, whereas these ones on the side, not so much. The one at the back, though, is slightly darker again because it's now even more so pointing away from the light because it's now moving towards the back of the object. The tail at the back of the crane is also very light because it's again directly facing the light source. This face would be slightly darker than the face on the other wing of the paper crane, but it would still be pretty light because again it's facing pretty much towards the light. And this side, again, I'll probably make that even darker because now it's starting to face away from it, as with the face I've just coloured in now. And that's just it, really. I can say this 100 times, but the technique will always be the same. If it's angled towards the light, it'll be lighter, and the further away the face is facing to away from the light, the darker the panel will be. And that's all you've got to keep in mind for any object that you draw in 3D. And of course, once you're finished, just rectify, make sure everything's okay, make sure everything's the right colour. And that's pretty much the rule of any rectilinear 3D shape. But what about your bottles, your vases, your plates? Well, we're going to focus on curvilinear objects in the next part of the tutorial. Let's dive straight into it. Let's start off with the basics and draw a simple circle, which you can use with a compass, or you can just find a round object around your house or whatever. And then draw a smaller circle inside this as well. And that will be depending on where your lighting is. So, for example, my lighting is coming from this direction. And basically, all we're going to do is we're going to draw rings around it, gradually getting darker the further away we go from the light source. And we want this to be as smooth as possible. And we'll just get darker and darker and darker and darker until we hit the edge of the sphere. Now, like I said before, we will want this to be smooth. And also, again, I reiterate, this is optional. You don't have to do this, but it's good practice. So it's highly recommended to do this before you do anything more complex, as this is probably the simplest version of any. It's basically the simplest curvilinear object. And we just keep doing this all the way around until we hit the edge of the sphere. And you just continue this around again. Try not to flatten the sort of rings as you go towards the top of the sphere. Keep it as round as possible. Don't flatten it at the top like I started to do, because that won't actually add a very realistic effect. And once you pretty much come to the end of the circle, you can then make it look like a sphere by smoothing things up. You can do this by just going back over it. You can use a blending stump, or you can use your finger if you don't have a blending stump, or if your blending stump's a bit too dirty. And that's pretty much it really for the sphere. And that's all that you need to consider when you're drawing any other curvilinear objects. With nothing more to say, once you're happy with your sphere, if you've followed along, is there any way to apply this to any object like vases, plates, and bottles? Well, in reality, the technique is actually very similar. And you'll find this out when we move on to the next part. To shade in any curvilinear object, first thing, lighting. My light is coming from this direction, and I've drawn a small round shape which follows the shape of the object that I'm drawing. And that's what you have to do for every single curvilinear object you decide to do. For example, I'm drawing a picture vase. And once you've done that, it's the same method. All you've got to do is draw rings around it, getting darker with a smooth gradient towards the outside of the shape. But this time, rather than trying to make rings that are sort of round, we want to make these rings follow the shape of the object, like I'm doing here. For example, you can see that the rings bend a lot less now as we're sort of moving towards the back. We're sort of moving around the picture vase now. We're really following the object, and that's mainly all it is. Just think of it as drawing a sphere, but this time it follows the object. And you can just keep doing that all the way around, getting darker like I'm doing here. And of course this side will be darker because it's further away from the light. This handle over here, however, is where it gets interesting. The handle on the inside will be darker because it's again facing away from the light, despite it being more closer to the light, because again it's facing the wrong way. It's facing away despite it being closer. And on the outside it will be lighter because it's facing towards the light. So the same techniques apply from the rectilinear objects to the curvilinear objects, like I'm drawing here. And that is pretty much all there is to explain. And then it's just smooth, smooth, smooth. Finally, as usual, you can add shadows if necessary. Trust me, this does definitely make the object look a lot more 3D. You don't even understand how much it makes a difference. And if you finish that, that is pretty much the end of the tutorial. Hopefully this tutorial was easy enough to understand. But one thing I did want to say before I wrap up the tutorial completely is that this is a technique that I used in college when I accidentally deleted the original reference photograph for my 3D object that I was trying to draw. So I just thought about the lighting and then tried to just sketch it in that way. And hopefully at this point, you're able to shade in any object without having to go online to find the object that you're trying to draw. From vases, to plates, to sculptures, paper cranes, wardrobes, you name it. And hopefully this has just given you a bit of an insight in how you can just use a simple lighting angle to sketch in any object of your choice, whether it be smooth or with pointed edges. But anyway, thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and Happy New Year once again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!